The Through the Eyes of Jesus podcast is proud to partner with the Ministry League Network. This network aims to produce, distribute, and promote quality resources, devotionals, and podcasts to benefit individuals and local congregations for God's glory. You can learn more about Ministry League by visiting ministryleague.com or by clicking on their link in the show notes. We hope you enjoy another episode of the Through the Eyes of Jesus podcast as we seek to look at worldly problems from a godly perspective. Podcast. Get your podcast here. Nice and hot. Get them while it's hot. Podcast. Welcome back to the Through the Eyes of Jesus podcast. My name is Isaiah Leininger. I am not a New York hot dog seller, but maybe I will be in a future life. Joining me today, as always, is my good friend Walker Howell, and we have a special returning guest on the show today. We love him so much. We just couldn't wait to get him back on the show. Go ahead and reintroduce yourself, Brother Zaquan.
My name is Zaquan Kemp, and I go to Heritage Christian University. You can follow me on my social media as Zaquan Kemp or Zaquan Malik Kemp on Instagram.
Zaquan, he was a part of our season 7, where we talked about how to love people intentionally. And so if you want to go ahead and check out that episode after you listen to this one, feel free to, because it was a great episode, just like this one's going to be. Zaquan's a great guy. We're very, very fortunate to have him come back on the show. So Zaquan, you're here today as a part of season 9, season that we're calling Startling Statements. Things in the Bible that may catch our eye, we may not understand what they mean, or maybe even some things that we think we understand what they mean, but we often don't go into depth with those things. We kind of just take them at face value. And the example today that we're going to be looking at definitely falls into the second of those categories. Today we're looking at the command that Paul gave to the Ephesian church in Ephesians chapter 4 when he said, "Be angry and do not sin." Now, again, this is definitely one of those ones where we think we understand what it means. Be angry and don't sin. Oh yeah, got it. That's pretty easy to follow. But there's a whole lot more to it than maybe we could have think. Don't you agree, Zaquan?
Yes, sir, I do.
So the full verse there is it's Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 26, where Paul said, "Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath." And so as we get into this episode, I think it's helpful for us to try and understand what are some reasons that people get angry. If you're like me, you've gotten angry before at a couple different things. And oftentimes you get angry about things that don't even matter. But sometimes you get angry about things that do matter. Well, Zaquan, what are some examples of things that people could get angry about?
Well, some people get angry over people cutting them off on when you're driving, a little here and there. If someone mistreats them, that's two reasons why people get angry. Another reason is pent up aggression or just grunts or rivalries. We see Alabama versus Auburn. We see that sometimes rivalries there. But I'm a Florida State guy, so I'm out of that conversation. We see some things like that, and that makes people angry at times and take it too far. We see people who murder each other because of angry thoughts, angry words, angry everything. So we see that, and people take it too far. So those are some of my reasons why people will get angry.
Yeah, and I think those are some excellent reasons. Maybe not excellent reasons to get angry, but those are some definite reasons as to why people get angry. We also have things like fear. Right? Maybe people are afraid, and instead of letting people know that they're afraid, they lash out in anger.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's just because they're stressed. I can't count the times that I've been overwhelmed with assignments or things in my personal life, and someone comes into the room with a simple question. I snap at them, get out. I turn into one of those fire-breathing dragons.
Man, Isaac.
Oh yeah, get off my lawn.
Or off.
Well, it happens a lot with you because I find you annoying. I'm kidding. I love you, Walker.
Yeah.
I love you, Walker.
Grace says the same thing. So it's okay.
Well, that's another conversation for another day. Anyway, point is, there's lots of different reasons why people get angry.
I've accepted who I am as a person. It's okay.
Yeah, well, I haven't yet, so we'll work on that later.
In the words of Dr. Blackwater, I accept the encouragement man I am.
Walker and I need to go to couple therapy. But anyway.
Wait, we're not a couple though.
Close enough. We spend enough time together.
Oh, enough with our antics. Continue.
Yeah. It's a wonder people listen to this show. Anyway, so those reasons that we listed that Quan and I talked about, those are legitimate reasons to why someone can get angry. If someone mistreats you or mistreats someone that you love, you're going to get angry about that. If you're holding on to a grudge about what someone did to you, or you're letting that fester and you're holding on to that anger, sooner or later that's going to pop out, and that's going to cause you to do something. And what are some ways that people sin when they get angry? Paul says, "Be angry and don't sin." Well, what are some ways that people sin when they're angry? Well, we thought of a couple. We thought about, first of all, seeking revenge, right? Someone hurt me, so I'm going to hurt them. They did something to me, so I'm going to do this to them. And clearly, that's not the right answer, right? We're told about that several times throughout the scripture, why seeking revenge is not the right answer. First and foremost, it's not our position to seek revenge. That's God. God is the avenger. God is the vindicator, if you will. And so it's not our job to seek revenge. We need to give that up to God. We see that in passages like First Thessalonians. I'm blanking on the passage reference right now.
Romans.
Yeah, that's also in Romans. Thank you, Zaquan. Absolutely. We also see people respond by using hurtful language or by gossiping behind people's back. And that clearly also goes against what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches us that we need to use our words carefully, that we need to use our words to encourage and to lift up and to build people up. And, James talked about how you can't have blessing to God and cursing towards man come out of the same mouth. That doesn't make any sense. A good tree doesn't produce good fruit and bad fruit. A good spring doesn't produce good water and bad water. You can't have both. And so we can't use our words to hurt. We can't use our words to tear down or to gossip. And we've got several episodes coming out about gossiping itself. So make sure you stay tuned for those as we go into that topic in a deeper way. But I think maybe the biggest way that people stand when they get angry is just by not being willing to forgive. Don't you agree, Zaquan?
I do, and I have a few thoughts for you too.
Go for it.
Going back to another reason why people get angry, I think of when people have that sense of, if you have a friend of yours who is trying to give you some tough love, people get angry over that stuff. It's like, I'm trying to help you out, but you get angry and you don't want to listen. And I found another reason. I found this very interesting. And we're going to get to that in a little bit, but hating and holding on to anger. I look at the verse that we looked at in Ephesians 4:27. It says, "Nor give place to the devil." So the passage right there in verse 26 did not end. It ends at verse 27. And I think about, when I think about holding on to anger, I think about this one person who's holding a water bottle in your mind that's not letting that dirty water go in the cup. And once we fester that anger, the more times we hold on to that, the more times we hurt even more. And anger only hurts just one person, which is yourself. And so we have to let that go, and giving that place to the devil, it's only hurting ourselves. So those are a few thoughts for you. What do you think, Isaiah?
I think you make some great points, Zaquan. If you're angry with someone and they don't know it, well, what good is that, right? If I'm mad at Walker, I'm not. Don't get upset, Walker. But if hypothetically,
I know you're always mad at me. It's okay.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. You're a good guy. But if hypothetically speaking, I was mad at Walker and he didn't know that, like Zaquan said, that's only going to affect me. He's going to go about his day, like he normally would, and I'm going to be sitting there stewing about, what I think Walker did to me, or what Walker said to me, or whatever the case may be, and it's not going to affect him at all.
And that's why some people can't stand me.
Well,
because I can go completely on about my day, even though someone may be mad at me.
This has been an interesting episode for Walker, but anyway, the point is, like Zaquan said, if the other person isn't aware that you're angry, it really does no good. And I'm reminded of the passage where Jesus said, if you bring your sacrifice to the temple and you have a grudge against your brother, leave your sacrifice there and go find him and reconcile that between you two. So that way, when you go to offer up your sacrifice, go to offer up your worship to God, your worship, your sacrifice isn't, hindered by the fact that you're angry at somebody else. And I love how Jesus points out that it's your responsibility there, right? If you're angry with someone, you go and seek that person out. You don't wait for them to crawl back to you and offer up an apology before you give them forgiveness. You go and seek them out. You go and be the bigger person. And oftentimes, especially when we're dealing with people who aren't Christians, that's going to blow their mind. When we apologize or when we go to them for reconciliation, even when they're the one who done something wrong, that's going to blow their mind. And they're going to sit there and think, why would he do that? Why would he offer me forgiveness when I didn't even ask for it? Well, it's because we're trying to be like God. We're trying to be like Jesus, and we're trying to make sure that we don't hold on to that anger. Like Zaquan said, hold on to it only hurts ourselves. And I would go as far as to say it would hurt the other person if we let that anger stay in us so long that we eventually lash out and take revenge, which is exactly what 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 and verse 8 tells us not to do. I eventually did find that passage I was looking for. It's 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 and verse 8. But the point is, if we want to be a Christian, if we want to live the way that Jesus told us to live, we can't be angry when we go to worship. We can't be angry when the sun goes down. We have to resolve those differences as soon as we can, because otherwise we're being hindered. We have something in our minds that is blocking us from being dedicated to God, from having our worship being acceptable to God. So we need to get those differences resolved as quickly as possible. And I'm sitting here completely aware that sometimes it's not possible to do that overnight. Sometimes it takes a while for people to be willing to come to the table and sit down and talk about what's going on. But the point is, you can't allow that to go on for longer than it needs to. Obviously, sometimes you're going to need some time to sit back and think about, the best way to respond. You're going to need some time to cool off, let your anger go down. But the point is, you need to get that resolved as quickly as possible, right? Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Get that resolved as quickly as possible. Get that figured out as quickly as possible. And so it's important. Go ahead, Zaquan.
And to that point, which I find really, really good, be angry and do not sin. It's not saying you cannot be angry. It's saying that yes, you can be angry, but righteously angry, and the aspect, and so, but do not commit, revenge or spiteful acts against somebody because they cause you to be angry. But Jesus, he even says, he goes further and says, love your enemies, pray for those who spitefully hate you, and so forth and so forth. And so when we look at this verse, we should not take it out of granted. It's like what Paul says in Romans: should we continually sin even though we have grace? Certainly not. Should we continue to be angry and seek revenge? No. Be angry, but do not sin. And so, to that point, Isaiah, I look at where the verse is actually coming from, which is Psalms 4:4. It says, "Be angry, do not sin." But look what David says: "Meditate within your heart on your bed and be still." And so he gives us a little bit of action right there, which is meditate. Meditate within your heart and be still on your bed and be still. And so he's not saying go crazy or anything. Don't like I said, take time to yourself and meditate. Take time for yourself and just think about it. Is that really right to be angry about that? First off, and apologize to that person you're angry at. And so it's taking those steps, and we see those steps as well in Matthew verses 18, chapter 18, when Jesus was talking about dealing with a sinning brother, go to them, of what you said, Isaiah. And so we have steps that we need to take in order for us to not be angry anymore, or first meditate. So those are a few things I had as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Zaquan. I go back to when Jesus was angry about the people in the temple, right? The people who made the house of the Lord into a den of thieves, as he said. Jesus was mad. Don't misunderstand what that passage is saying. Jesus was furious. But what did he do? Well, he went out and he made a whip. He didn't just go in there blindly, knocking tables over. He took the time to make an instrument. He was meticulous about that.
Mhm.
And some people will say, wow, that makes it seem like he's even more angry that he made a whip, right? But Jesus was not using that whip to hurt people. He was using that whip to knock over tables and to drive people out, right? So Jesus, he was meticulous there. He was, under control, right? So he didn't let his anger control him. He took that time to make that whip. He fastened it, as John would say. That gave him the time to cool off a little bit. And I'm not saying that we can solve all of our problems by making whips. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not Indiana Jones, and neither are you. But what I am saying is that, like Zaquan said, and like David said, and more importantly, like what God has said, we need to take some time, step back, and evaluate, why am I angry? Is this something that really deserves me to be angry about? Or is this something that I need to be able to be the bigger person in this situation and say, yeah, that made me upset, but I'm willing to forgive you.
Yeah.
In that same chapter that Zaquan mentioned a few seconds ago in Matthew chapter 18, we find the parable of the unforgiving servant. A servant who was so angry and spiteful and full of rage that even after his enormous, gigantic, never being able to pay off kind of debt was forgiven, he went out and he choked another servant who couldn't pay him the measly wage that he owed that first servant. That's anger, that's rage, that's hatred, and that's something that Christians should not have. And again, I'm not sitting here saying that Christians are supposed to be peaceful and loving and pacifists all the time, because like Zaquan mentioned, the Bible doesn't say don't get angry. The Bible says be angry, but when you are, don't sin. If you get angry, control your anger. Don't let your anger control you, but be the one in charge. Don't fly off the handle, but have your emotions in check. And that's something that we're supposed to have as Christians. We're supposed to have self-control. That's one of the fruits of the Spirit that Paul talks about in Galatians chapter 5. And so we need to make sure that when we're angry, we don't sin.
Right.
When we get upset, we don't take that out on other people. And if we do, we need to apologize, and we need to use that as an example or an opportunity for us to learn from our mistake. We need to be in control of our emotions. We need to make sure that we are not holding on to our anger. It's important for us to think about how to treat people when we're angry. It's important for us to think about conflict resolution skill and being able to communicate with people about things that are frustrating or difficult to talk about, but they need to be talked about anyway. You're going to have that in business. You're going to have that in marriage. You're going to have that at anywhere that you are. There's going to be conflict. In an episode that we haven't released yet, as at the time of this recording, we had a brother Jerry Barber come on, and he said something to the effect of, "Where there's people, there's problems."
Mm.
And that's very true. Where there's people, there's going to be problems. Where there's people, there's going to be conflict, because people don't always agree with one another.
Isaiah and I have conflict whenever it comes to this podcast. But conflict is good though, right? Because like conflict shows that people care about something, and it shows that people it shows people have a deep desire or a deep passion for something. So and so that's a good thing. So conflict isn't inherently bad, but how you handle it, like you said.
Yeah. I just want to quickly say that Walker and I are good friends. We may joke around a lot, but I'm worried that people may think that we're not joking. Walker and I are legitimately friends. We wouldn't be doing this podcast together if we didn't like each other.
That would be ironic, wouldn't it? To have two enemies doing a podcast over, well, number one, like doing an episode that we've done before about loving your enemies, or this episode about Be Angry and Not.
Yeah, it would be a weird form of capital punishment, I think. Anyway,
that's why we have to bring on guests to moderate us, you know?
No.
My point is, Walker and I love each other, and I'm worried that some people may think that we don't. Anyway, like you were saying, Walker, yes, absolutely. Conflict resolution, it's important. And like you said, conflict is a good thing because it shows that people, they want the best for whatever situation that they're in. And they may not agree in the moment about what that is, but they want the best for that situation. I remember, I hope this is okay for me to share. I remember sitting in on an elders meeting at a congregation one time, and they were thinking about starting up some sort of new program for making sure that they fed their widows, right? Similar to what we see in Acts chapter 6. They were trying to make sure that those who needed food, like those who were sick or those who were, bedridden or whatever the case may be, that they got food. They were trying to figure out, who would be in charge of this and how would this work? And, do we need a deacon over this? And do we let them use the kitchens here at the building? Or, how's this all going to work? And one elder was strongly against this idea. I don't remember why now, but he was strongly against this idea. But he recognized that the rest of the elders, they liked this idea. They wanted to put this into motion. And he even said himself, I don't understand why I don't like this so much. I just don't. But I'm willing to step back and allow this to go forward instead of just putting my foot in the ground and making sure that I get my way. Because he recognized that everyone else in the room was on board with this idea. And I gained a lot of respect for him and for everyone else in that room that day based on what I saw. Because he was willing to stick up for what he believed in, but he was also willing to sit around and say, I'm the only one who feels this way. Clearly, I'm in the minority. I'm going to step back and I'm not going to make sure that my way happens. I'm going to let what the group thinks is best happen. That's called being the bigger person.
Mm-hmm.
He could have easily, stamped his foot and said, I disagree with this. And he could have kept arguing and once it eventually passed, he could have complained the whole time about how this was an awful idea. And again, I don't remember exactly why he was upset with this. It was a good reason, but other people in the room found a solution to his problem that he didn't necessarily agree with, but they thought it would work. Anyway, the point is, he made sure that it wasn't just his way that happened. He made sure that when there was conflict there, that it was resolved peaceably and with love for all in the room.
I also had a story too. I in my timeline of being alive, I've been angry plenty of times, but more recently though, I've this is a ministry story as well. Tidbit for you guys as well. More than recent, I can't give you details of what happened, but I had a situation where it all could have been avoided though if I was more aware. Um, Basically, I received the message late at night saying how uh, I wasn't I was not taking things seriously in anything to a situation, and I explained. She said that I did not apologize or anything or made a big deal about it, something. And so I took a breather. This is late at night. I came back from a 2 day trip at that point, and I was just tired. I was worn out. I just wanted to go to bed and just stuff like that. And so I was so mad and so angry that she texted me that at night. I just took 30 minutes to just relax and get all the emotion out of it. Once you take that emotion out of being angry in situations like that and conflict resolutions, you can kind of get more sensible, more logical when you have moments like that. And so I took a breather, called some mentors, my mom and everything, and just talked to them about the situation and calmed me down. And I responded respectfully and professionally. And so you will have moments in ministry where you, and I know I'm like 2 years into ministry, but it's okay. I've already experienced enough um, to really either hinder you or to help you to grow if you allow it to help you to grow. If that makes sense, like your anger, your emotions can really topple you or really make you a better person. And so you really have to discern, is this worth it? Is this important to get mad over or something, let it go? So conflict resolution is important. Conflict is important to help you discern better. Okay, is it important? Is it not important? Is it something I can get past? And so it helps a lot when you can have the wisdom to know why am I angry, and this is really important. So those two questions really help a lot when you're angry. So
I think it's also important to have an outlet there. You know, whether it's lifting weights or going on a walk or listening to music or painting or watching a TV show or whatever it is, finding some way to help you take your mind off of the emotions that you're feeling, and then you're able to come back to that problem, whatever it may be, with a clear mind, with a thoughtful head. I mean, that's just called self-care. First of all, having an outlet to express yourself with, but you know, being able to step back and allow that those emotions, those powerful emotions, to fade a little bit, so you're able to think a little bit more clearly. And Zaquan gave an example of when he was able to do that, but I'm sure if we pressed him hard enough, we could find an example where Zaquan was not able to do that. And I know from my experience that there's been times where I was not able to do that, and Walker's not been able to do that because we're people. And so we're not just trying to sit here and say that the three of us are perfect at this by any means.
I know that's hard for some to believe.
Yeah, we're not perfect by any means. I'll say that over and over and over again. We're not perfect by any means. That's why we needed Jesus.
mm-hmm.
But what we are saying is that we're seeing things in the scripture that help us, or that can help us if we allow them to, when we're stressed, when we're frustrated, when we're angry, how to deal with those things. And I think it's important for us to remember when we get angry. Again, we have those questions: why am I angry? Why is this upsetting me? How should I respond to this? But a big question really is just what's truly important. You know, I go back to the story that I shared earlier about that elders meeting. That elder realized what was important was not him getting his way. He realized it was important to keep the unity in the group. He realized it was important to move on and to think about other things that needed their attention. And so he was willing to step back. And again, I gained a lot of respect for him, how he handled himself in that meeting, and I gained a lot of respect for that group of men, how they all handled with him being, kind of the lone guy who didn't agree with the majority. So there was excuse me, that elder realized what was important. And I think when we're able to do that same thing, it really helps us when we're angry. What do you think, Zaquan?
I think so too. And not only that, but I'll add to that as well is to, man, I really do not like texting people. I think it's the worst form of communication as far as yes, it's fast communication. However, the Bible did not say to text somebody when you're angry. It said go to that person. Go to that person face to face. And I think that texting somebody when you're angry is the worst form of resolving anything. And I may be on the island alone, but that's okay. I'll die on that hill. But I think I think that's the right statement. So
Yeah, I agree with that, Zaquan. There's a lot of conversations that you can have over text, but there's a lot of conversations that you can't have over text, at least not the way that they need to be had. You're not going to be able to get body language. You're not going to be able to hear the way that someone's saying something. And, maybe even another reason is why this is, you know, you set your phone down, you miss a text, and all of a sudden it's 3 days later and you forget to respond to that person. I'm kind of bad about that sometimes, but point is, being in person, it allows you to see the real, genuine other person, and not just a screen, not just a profile picture, but it reminds you that this is another soul. This is another image bearer. This is another person that God created exactly the way that he wanted to. And so I agree with you, Zaquan, that maybe some of those things, like you pointed out, should be done in person. Jesus said, go and talk to that person. He didn't just say, shoot him a Facebook message. He didn't just say, shoot him a text or give him a call. Obviously sometimes that's going to be what you need to do based on distance or things like that. But I would agree with you, Zaquan, that it would be better to do it in person if at all possible. But like I was saying, it goes back to focusing on what's important. Right? Is this thing that you're angry about so important that you're willing to risk this entire relationship with this person, or are you willing to let that stew and so that you can get your revenge later? You could snap at them, or is it important for you to show people how God loved you and how God forgives you and how God has mercy for you? I know that's a difficult perspective to have in the heat of the moment. It's easy to get swept up off your feet with those emotions because, like I said earlier, those are powerful emotions. Things like anger and fear and stress, those are powerful things. But if we are able to keep our mind set on what's important, on loving God and loving each other, then it's going to be a little bit easier for us to find peace when we're angry. And that mindset doesn't happen in the moment, right? Someone makes me mad, I'm not going to be able to have the presence of mind in that moment to say, hold on, wait a minute, I need to love God and love other people. That needs to be a decision that I've made way before that. That needs to be a decision that I've made long, long ago, that no matter what happens, I'm going to love God, I'm going to love other people. I can't make that decision in the moment. That's not something that I can, just sit there and say, oh, yeah, I think I'll start doing this now. It has to be something that I've been doing for a while. What do you think, Walker?
I agree, and I think that all this really is something that challenges me because I know sometimes I'm quick to react and not really think about the action that I do, and sometimes you don't even realize you're expressing anger. And, and what I mean by that is that I find myself sometimes being angry about a situation, but oftentimes I try to mask it and I try to put on a fake face about it, and so I do, and so I act in a different way. That's definitely not my genuine self, and ultimately other people see my anger being expressed, and it ultimately seems like I'm taking it out on them, which I'm definitely not. But it ultimately results in that. So this has caused me to reflect deeply on just my personal life and thinking about how I react to certain situations. So I'm thankful for the thoughts that have been shared so far, and I'm glad that we're getting to dive into scripture now and looking at a few things to remind us um, about how to manage our anger. And I think one of the first places to begin is the book of James. In James, chapter 1 and verse number 19, we see,
Verse 20 as well, please, Walker.
and verse 20, yes, we see this, my beloved brethren, but everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not achieve righteousness of God. There's a saying that goes, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and that's to hear more and talk less. So I believe oftentimes we could help our anger in a way, listen to the other person rather than trying to defend ourselves, or rather than trying to stand up for what we may think is right. We try to acknowledge the problem and not attack the person. I think we get a lot farther in handling different conflicts.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times we can get angry with people over misunderstanding, right? We think that they said something or we think that they did something that we don't like. So we come at them and, how dare you say this? How dare you do this?
Yeah.
And we like Walker said, we attack the person instead of the problem. And I see that happen a lot with couples, right? Guy says something, the girl gets, her feelings hurt, or the girl says something and the guy gets his feelings hurt. And instead of attacking the problem, which is, I don't like how you said that, that reminded me of this, they attack each other. And they tear down each other. They call each other names, and they walk away angry from each other, and that's not how that should go. You need to attack the problem, not the person. But I think it's also interesting that what James says here in verse 20, which is why I specifically asked Walker to read it. We didn't have verse 20 listed on our script, but verse 20 says, "For the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God." Right? We can be angry all we want, but James clearly tells us that being angry doesn't achieve what we want to achieve. What do we as Christians want to achieve? We want to be righteous like God is righteous.
Yeah.
We want to live like Jesus lived. But if we're angry, we're not doing that because the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So that's why James says, "Be slow to wrath, but be swift to hear." Be willing to listen to other people. Be willing to hear them out and hear their perspective. Because oftentimes when you hear someone else's perspective, you realize that they have just as much right to be angry as you do. Because maybe they've done something and you've retaliated and now you're both angry. They have just as much reason to be angry or hurt or upset as you do. And so listening, like Walker said, and like James says here, truly can be a great way to resolve conflict and to help people when they're angry.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the Proverbs writer even speaks to this as well in Proverbs 15 and verse 29. He who is slow to anger has great understanding, but he who is quick tempered exalts folly. And so it goes back to what Isaiah was saying, that oftentimes we need to be slow to act and more willing to just be open minded and listen to others. Zaquan, you have anything to add to what we talked about so far?
I was I was thinking what you're thinking, Walker. As I read this quote the other day or yesterday that it said that we need to get better at listening to understand, not to reply. And so
Absolutely.
that is a true quote, true statement, because sometimes we're so quick to listen to somebody to help their problems out versus listening to what they need to be heard and to understand their issues, understand their problems, understand that they're happy or sad or angry at the moment, but just to listen. I know that's a different topic, but anger produces a lot out of you. And but listening to a Walker, Walker said this, but it's listening to uh, help you understand better. And so that is some key things to dealing with anger, dealing with situations, and not only that, but once you have someone to listen to you, but a soft answer, as it says in Proverbs 15:1, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And so if you're trying to help somebody who's dealing with anger or have anger issues, never deliver a harsh word to them because it only makes it worse. It's like adding oil to a fire. You don't want to do that. You add water or you try to put it out quickly as possible, but or safely as possible. Um, and so something is better to be nice, to be gentle when you deal with someone angry. It's better to take emotion out of your anger when you're dealing with anger. And so those are some few thoughts for y'all. What do y'all think?
And I think it's also important to remember that, oftentimes whenever someone is angry, unless they are, explicitly angry at you, typically if someone's angry, they're angry about the situation, not necessarily angry at you. So if someone does retaliate in a way that comes across as, hey, that they're angry, it's not that they're angry at you, it's just that they're angry at whatever the situation is going on around them. So we can't be so quick to be offended by the fact that, someone is expressing their anger towards us, because anger is an emotion, and it's an emotion that we all feel, and it's an emotion that's going to take the best of us. And sometimes it's not a person's intention to express that toward you directly, but you're just ultimately the recipient of it because there's so much built up, and now it's all coming out, and they haven't had a chance. And so that ultimately, you, in a way, as hard as this may be or sound, it should provide you some sense of like, this person trusts me enough to, or or relies on me enough in order to be this vulnerable around me, because it takes a lot of vulnerability to be angry around someone else or to express that type of emotion, because a lot of us like to maybe mask ourselves and try to put on this perfect person where we have no issues in our life of attitude, but I don't believe is very authentic and genuine. And I think we should all be more vulnerable, but also that comes with a price, because it's not easy for a lot of us to be vulnerable and open and express our emotions openly. We're afraid of what other people might think about us. Anyhow, that's my little soapbox, but I'll get back to
It's important for us to say that anger is a healthy emotion,
right.
right? If it's not normal for people to not get angry.
Yeah.
Uh, there are plenty of situations where being angry is a justifiable response to something. It's like some of the things that we mentioned earlier. When someone hurts you or hurts someone that you love, if you're not angry about that, then there's usually something wrong, right?
Questioning your love for the other
Yeah,
people.
absolutely. But it's important that as we start to wind down this episode, we remember what Paul said and what David said: be angry and do not sin. Right? Anger is a healthy emotion. It needs to be expressed, but it needs to be expressed in the right way. And it needs to be responded to in the right way. Right? When someone's angry with you or when you're angry with someone else, it needs to be dealt with in the right way. And I think the key word for this episode today is not anger, but it's actually self-control.
Hmm.
If we go back to that passage in James or the passages that we read in Proverbs, what do all those things have in common? Being slow to wrath, having a soft word to turn away wrath. What do all those things have in common? Well, it's them having self-control over the situation. Right? Whoever's slow to anger takes self-control. So when you're angry or when someone's angry with you, we need to be able to have the self-control necessary. Make sure that that situation doesn't get out of hand. Again, I go back to Jesus in John chapter 2 when he went into the temple. He was angry, he was furious, and he had every right to do so. But he didn't let his anger control him. He controlled his anger. And I think that story is in that scripture for that exact reason. Obviously, I'm not God. I'm not one of the inspired authors. I'm not the Holy Spirit. So I can't say with 100% certainty. But I think that story is in there to show us that anger is not a bad thing. But anger without self-control, that's a bad thing. Again, Paul says, be angry and do not sin. Have that self-control necessary. Make sure that even when you're angry, even when someone does something to you, or when something happens that justifies being angry, don't let that situation get worse. Have the self-control necessary to say, I'm going to stop this before it gets any worse, before it gets any bigger, before it hurts more people. Be angry and do not sin. This is a startling statement, not because it's hard to understand, but because it's hard to put into practice. We've said so many times, anger is a powerful, powerful emotion that routinely gets the best of people, all the way from small children up to even world leaders. People can get angry, and it's healthy too in some instances. But we can't let our anger control us. We have to have the self-control, that fruit of the Spirit, in order to rule over our anger and not give Satan an opportunity to use our anger to hurt ourselves or to hurt other people. Any final thoughts from Walker Zaquan as we wrap up this episode?
Uh, one thing
Amen.
I will say is that you guys are great. I appreciate what y'all do. I'm proud of each and every single one of y'all. And be angry, but do not sin. That's all I gotta say.
We appreciate you too, Zaquan. We greatly appreciate the time that you spent helping us with this episode and episodes in the past. And Lord willing, maybe we'll have you back on the show here in the future. That would be awesome.
I hope so too.
But again, thank you so much for your time today, Walker. As much as we joke today, thank you truly for all that you do behind the scenes.
Hey, thank you.
You do more of the work than I do, man, especially on this podcast. You should get an email from Walker sometime. We were joking
Oh
about
my
this
goodness.
yesterday.
Oh,
Walker's in charge of just about everything at the school. But anyway,
that's besides the point.
that's beside the point.
Hey, I'll be
Zaquan,
seeing y'all. I'll be seeing y'all soon, actually.
hey, that's awesome. We're looking forward to it.
Yes,
We'll
sir.
see you soon.
Will you be at the lectures?
I'll
the
be there
lecture?
for one night.
Very good.
All right. We'll make sure we get in contact with you. We'll make sure we'll get to see you. That would be awesome.
I
anyway,
won't be hard to find. Yes, sir.
Perfect. As we wrap up this episode, Zaquan, again, thank you so much. Walker, thank you for everything. And if you have any questions or comments about this episode, feel free to reach out to us. You can find any way to contact us at tteoj.com. That's our website. Find a way to email us there, or find our social media profiles, and you can message us any way there. If you have a question about this episode or a different episode, or just a question in general for us, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get your questions, and we'd love to talk with you about the Jesus that we serve, and about the God that we serve, about the gospel that we try to practice. Again, Zaquan, thank you so much. We love you, man. And Walker, if there's nothing else that needs to be said, go ahead and close us out in prayer, please.
Let's pray. God, you're the definition of love. You showed us the love that we needed to be shown on the cross of Calvary. You continue to show it to us each and every day in our lives, and we're so thankful for the love that you demonstrate to us. We're thankful that you're not a God that is quick to anger. Rather, you're a God that loves, God that quick to show us compassion, mercy, grace. Times whenever everybody else around us may have direct response to anger. Thankful that we serve a God like you. So thankful for the blessings that you give us on a day-to-day basis. Thankful for this podcast, what it me and people that get to come on the show, such as Zaquan, the work he does. Thankful for Isaiah and the help he provides the podcast. Thankful for the work he does with the congregation he works at and abroad. And I'm thankful for all the godly in this life who are mentors to me in direct and indirect ways. Really grateful. All the continued blessings that you show us on a day-to-day basis. Thankful for Jesus, God on the cross, go to what it looks like, demonstrate self-control, demonstrate love, and not so quick to anger, rather be quick to understand, quick to have a compassionate and loving heart. Pray all this in